All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because we have sort of a packed webinar here. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this two-part webinar on Mexican gray wolves. We have some really special guests presenting this evening, and I'm excited to get into their presentations. I hope this finds you all and your families safe and healthy this evening, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. My name is Amy Harwood, and I'm the coordinator for Lobos of the Southwest, which is a collaborative outreach and education project that's brought together by many groups and individuals who work to protect Mexican gray wolves. I'm joining you all this evening from Tucson, which is on unceded Tohono O'odham land. And today we're going to be speaking about the recovery effort of Mexican gray wolves, which is currently occurring throughout the traditional homelands of Apache, Hopi, Dene, Havasupai, Pueblo, and several other tribes on this side of the Mexican-U.S. border, as well as Mexican gray wolves stretched into Mexico, across the border into Mexico, into Tarahumara, Tewa, and other tribal affiliations. There are so many people from around the country joining this evening, which is great to see. And if you are joining from a place that you're not aware of the indigenous connection to that land, I hope you take some time after the call to find out more about that. Before I introduce our presenters, I want to let you know that we're taking questions in the Q&A section, which if you're on your computers, there's an option at the bottom of your screen to I think most of them at the bottom, where you can click on Q&A and submit your questions, and we'll ask those at the end. The presentations should take about an hour, a little less than an hour, and then we'll open up Q&A after that. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll be posting it online so that people can share it with friends who weren't able to join us. I'll send out a link afterwards. And then you can also change the view of the speakers on your own screen by choosing the gallery or speaker view. On computers, that's usually up in the upper right corner. You might need to move your cursor around a little to find it. But you have control to how you see it. So, okay, so why are we here today? The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued a request for comments last month, and this began a 60-day period for the public to provide input on the proposed changes to what's called the 10J management rule. This is a rule that directs a lot of aspects of how the Fish and Wildlife Service fulfills its obligation to recover the Mexican gray wolf to a sustainable wild population. Comment period is in response to a scoping letter that outlines the process that the service will go through to make the changes. So presumably we're at the beginning of the process, and this is our opportunity to provide early public input to be incorporated. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is responsible for implementing the Endangered Species Act, which, as most of you probably know, is a very powerful law that is intended to protect threatened wildlife and plant species from extinction. The Fish and Wildlife Service uses a particular management tool, which is actually listed under Section 10J of the ESA, which is why we call it 10J, when a species is being reintroduced to a landscape it has been wiped out from. This 10J gives the Fish and Wildlife Service a little more flexibility, which is not always a good kind of flexibility, to adapt to the Endangered Species Act regulations in a way that better fits the demands of bringing a species back from the brink of extinction. So under that part of the law, the agency has to come up with specific guidance specific to that species. The Fish and Wildlife Service actually tried to make changes to the 10J rule in 2015. However, the changes that they proposed would have led to a really bleak future for Lobo recovery. And so as a result, conservation organizations immediately sued the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for not fulfilling their obligation. And the court actually really agreed with the groups that sued the agency. U.S. District Court Judge Jennifer Zips came back with an order for the Fish and Wildlife Service to redo the process that they had done. And she explicitly called out that they needed to have a more honest interpretation of the best available science. So this was a really big victory for Lobos. And though wolves have had to wait now quite a while for the process to be reinitiated, that's the moment that we're in right now. This is the opportunity that's in front of us. In the second webinar next week, we're going to cover what we hope to see in this next chapter. But we thought it was this was a good opportunity to also kind of look back and understand how the recovery of the species was even possible. So we have 3 presenters with us who will speak on different dimensions of recovery. We have Trey Graves from the Endangered Species Coalition, who will talk about Mexican gray wolves as a unique and remarkable wolf species. And then we'll have Jean Osorio, a longtime wolf advocate. Jean has spent many nights under the stars in Lobo country and has had the pleasure of seeing many wild Mexican wolves, which we'll talk about. And we'll conclude with Dave Parsons, who currently works with Project Coyote and Rewilding Institute. Dave was the coordinator of the Mexican gray wolf recovery effort for U.S. Fish and Wildlife when the wolves were originally released. And he continues to hold the agency accountable to those original recovery goals. I'm really grateful to him being here. Both Dave and Jean have many stories from years of being wolf advocates, and a few of them I hope they'll share. And they really continue to shine a light forward for Lobo recovery. So without further ado, I'll pass the torch over to Trey and we'll begin the presentations.